The Great Hall of Station Orion 7 was the largest structure ever built by any species in the known galaxy. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed inside it. Thousands of beings from 12 different empires filled the space, their voices creating a constant hum of conversation in dozens of languages. Princess Yira stood at the entrance and felt very small. She was tall for her species, with skin that glowed faintly like moonlight on water. Her hair fell past her shoulders in waves of pale silver, and her eyes were the color of amethysts. To humans, she might have looked beautiful. To the rest of the galaxy, she looked like a curse walking on two legs. The Vellani had been called many terrible things over the centuries. Cursed, unlucky, touched by death. Other species believed that contact with Vellani blood brought misfortune, that their empathic touch could steal your soul, that their pale glow was the light of dying stars. None of it was true, but truth rarely mattered when fear was involved. Yira's hands trembled slightly as she walked forward. Behind her came 4 guards in ceremonial armor, their faces hidden behind masks. They were the only ones willing to escort her. Even among her own people, Yira's mission was considered hopeless. Her father, Emperor Voren, lay dying in the palace on their homeworld. A sickness with no cure was slowly taking him away, and with him would go the last protection the Vellani had against their enemies. The Korath Dominion had been waiting for decades, watching, planning. The moment Voren died, they would invade. The Vellani had technology. They had medicine that could heal almost any wound. They had shields that could stop weapons that other species could not even imagine. But they did not have soldiers. They did not have warriors. In 10,000 years of civilization, the Vellani had never fought a war. They were going to be destroyed, unless Yira could find an ally, unless she could convince someone, anyone, to stand with her people. The Unity Summit happened once every 5 years. Representatives from all the major empires gathered to discuss trade, borders, and peace. It was also, traditionally, a place where political marriages were arranged. Yira had come to offer herself. She walked to the center of the Great Hall, where a raised platform waited. The crowd grew quiet as she climbed the steps. Thousands of alien eyes watched her with expressions ranging from disgust to curiosity to open hatred. Yira lifted her chin and spoke in the common trade language. Her voice did not shake. I am Princess Yira of the Vellani Empire. I come with an offer of alliance through marriage. My people offer our technology, our resources, and our eternal friendship to any empire willing to stand with us. The silence that followed was worse than laughter would have been. Then, one by one, the rejections came. The Korath prince, a massive creature covered in dark scales, stepped forward first. His lips pulled back to show rows of sharp teeth. The Korath do not touch cursed things, he said. We will take your empire soon enough. We do not need to marry for it. He spat at the ground near her feet. The Chitin delegate came next, an insectoid being with too many legs and clicking mandibles. The swarm has no interest in pale ghosts. Your blood is poison. Your touch is death. The Valdorians, known throughout the galaxy for their diplomatic nature, simply shook their heads and looked away. The Ellerai, gentle healers who had helped countless species, refused to even meet her eyes. On and on it went. Every empire, every species, every noble son who might have taken her hand instead turned his back. Some were cruel about it, throwing insults. Others were quiet, almost apologetic. But still, they refused. Yira stood alone on that platform as the rejections piled up around her like stones. She kept her face calm because she had been trained since childhood to hide her emotions. She thought of her father, waiting for news that would never come. She thought of her people, innocent beings who had never hurt anyone, who would suffer and die because the galaxy had decided long ago to hate them. She thought about giving up. Then a voice spoke from the back of the hall. I'll hear her proposal. The crowd stirred, confused. Heads turned, trying to find the speaker. Yira looked up, her purple eyes searching. A man was walking forward through the crowd. He was not particularly tall. His hair was dark, his skin a warm brown, his features unremarkable by galactic standards. He wore a simple gray uniform with a small emblem on the shoulder that most beings in the room did not recognize. He was human. Humanity had joined galactic society only 40 years ago. They were considered primitive, barely worth noticing. Their ships were slow, their weapons outdated, their single planet insignificant. Most empires forgot they existed. The man climbed the steps to the platform. Up close, Yira could see that he was young, perhaps 30 years by human counting. His eyes were dark and steady, and they looked at her without fear or disgust. "Lieutenant Kang Do-hyun," he said, offering a small bow. "Earth Federation, Diplomatic Corps." Whispers spread through the crowd. Some beings laughed. A human? Offering to hear the cursed princess? It was absurd. It was pathetic. Yira did not care about their laughter. She was staring at this strange human who had done what no one else would do. "Why?" she asked. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Why would you speak to me when everyone else refused?" Kang Do-hyun tilted his head slightly, as if the question confused him. "Where I come from," he said, "we judge people by their actions, not their blood. I don't know if the stories about your people are true, but I know that you came here alone, stood in front of beings who hate you, and asked for help. That takes courage." He smiled. "Just a little. The least I can do is listen." Yira felt something strange in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it. Hope, small and fragile, but real. The Korath prince laughed, a harsh and ugly sound. "Humans are even more foolish than we thought. Go ahead, little man. Take the cursed bride. The Dominion will destroy you both." Do-hyun turned to face the prince. He was much smaller than the alien, barely reaching his shoulder, but his voice was calm and clear. "Maybe you will," he said, "but at least we'll go down fighting. That's more than can be said for cowards who only attack the weak." The prince's eyes narrowed with rage, but before he could respond, Do-hyun had turned back to Yira. "Princess," he said, "I can't promise you an empire. Earth has one planet, a few colonies, and not much else. But if you're willing to talk, I'm willing to listen. And who knows, maybe small isn't the same as weak." He offered his hand. Yira looked at it for a long moment. A human hand. Warm and alive and unafraid. In 10,000 years, no one from another species had ever willingly offered to touch a Villani. She took his hand, and in that moment, without knowing it, they changed the course of galactic history. The human delegation quarters were located in one of the older sections of Station Orion 7. The corridors were narrow, the lighting dim, and the rooms small. It was clear that whoever assigned spaces had not considered humanity important enough for anything better. Yira did not mind. After the grand hall with its thousands of staring eyes, the small room felt almost peaceful. Do-hyun guided her to a simple chair and then moved to a counter where various containers sat. He opened one and began doing something with hot water. "Tea," he explained, seeing her curious look. "It's a human drink. We offer it to guests. I hope you can drink it. I don't actually know much about Villani biology." Yira watched him work. His movements were careful and practiced. She noticed that his hands were steady, unlike hers. "I can drink most things that humans can," she said. "Our species are not so different. We breathe the same air. We walk on two legs. We feel emotions." "ASCAP." Do-hyun brought 2 small cups and handed one to her. The liquid inside was golden brown and smelled like flowers and earth. Yira took a small sip. It was warm and slightly bitter, but not unpleasant. "It's good," she said, surprised. Do-hyun sat across from her, holding his own cup. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was comfortable, which surprised Yira even more than the tea. "So," Do-hyun said finally, "tell me about your people. Tell me why you need an alliance badly enough to come here alone and face all that hatred. Yira set down her cup. She had prepared speeches for this moment. Formal words about treaties and resources and mutual benefit. But something about Do-hyun's simple kindness made her want to speak plainly. My father is dying, she said. He has a disease that even our medicine cannot cure. When he dies, I will become empress. But being empress will mean nothing if there is no empire left. She told him everything. She told him about the Korath, who had been watching the Villani for generations, waiting for the moment to strike. She told him about her people's peaceful nature, how they had never developed weapons because they had never needed them. She told him about the 3 star systems that belonged to the Villani, rich with rare minerals and home to billions of innocent people. We have technology that most species cannot even understand, Yira said. Our medical science can cure diseases that others think are death sentences. Our shields can stop weapons that would destroy entire cities. But none of it matters if we cannot defend ourselves. Do-hyun listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. What do the Korath want? He asked. Everything. Our worlds. Our technology. Our people as slaves. Yira's voice hardened. They have wanted us for centuries. The only thing stopping them was my father. He was clever. He made deals, played different empires against each other, kept the Korath unsure. But now he is too weak. And everyone knows it. And a marriage alliance would change that? Yira nodded. If I marry into another empire, the Villani become their problem. The Korath would have to think twice about attacking if it meant war with a powerful ally. Do-hyun set down his teacup and leaned forward. His dark eyes were thoughtful. Can I ask you something personal? Yira hesitated, then nodded. What do you want? Do-hyun asked. Not your empire. Not your father. You. What does Princess Yira want? The question hit her like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. No one had ever asked her that. Her entire life had been about duty, about her people, about the empire. What she wanted had never mattered. She stopped, tried again. I want my people to survive. I want them to be safe. That's what you want for them. What do you want for yourself? Yira felt something crack inside her chest. She looked down at her glowing hands, at the silver veins visible beneath her pale skin. I want to be seen, she whispered. Not as a curse, not as a monster, not as a symbol or a bargaining piece. I want someone to look at me and see a person. When she looked up, Do-hyun was watching her with an expression she could not name. I see a person, he said quietly. I see someone brave enough to stand alone in front of her enemies, someone strong enough to keep fighting when everyone tells her to give up, someone who loves her people enough to sacrifice everything for them. He paused. I see someone worth standing beside. Yira felt tears threatening to fall. She blinked them back. You barely know me, she said. I know enough. Do-hyun stood and walked to a communication panel on the wall. I need to contact Earth. I can't make this decision alone. But I want you to know something first. Also Arda, I see you Arda. He turned back to face her. If Earth agrees, if we do this, I won't be doing it just for politics or resources. I'll be doing it because I think it's right. Because I think you deserve someone who chooses to stand beside you, not someone who's forced to. He activated the panel and spent the next hour speaking with officials on Earth. Yira sat quietly, sipping her tea, listening to debates and questions she only half understood. Some voices were excited about the possibilities. Others were afraid. A few were angry, demanding to know why Earth should risk everything for aliens who had never helped them. Through it all, Do-hyun remained calm. He explained, he argued, he made his case. Finally, an older voice spoke through the panel. Lieutenant Kang, the Council has made its decision. This is a personal matter, as much as a political one. You would bear the greatest cost. Therefore, we leave the final choice to you." The communication ended. Do-hyun stood very still for a long moment. Then he turned to Yira. "There's a tradition on Earth," he said. "When someone makes a serious promise, they kneel. It shows respect and commitment." He walked to where she sat and lowered himself to one knee before her. Yira's breath caught in her throat. "Princess Yira of the Vellani Empire," Do-hyun said, "I formally accept your proposal of marriage and alliance. I cannot offer you a great fleet or a powerful army, but I can offer you my word, my loyalty, and my promise to stand beside you no matter what comes." He looked up at her, his dark eyes steady. "I don't kneel because I have to," he said. "I kneel because you deserve someone who chooses to. Someone who sees you for who you really are, and wants to stand with you anyway." "Well." Yira reached out with trembling hands and touched his face. The moment her fingers made contact, her empathic abilities activated. She felt what he was feeling. What he was truly feeling beneath all the words and promises. There was no deception, no hidden agenda, no fear or disgust. There was only kindness, determination, and underneath it all, a deep, quiet loneliness that matched her own so perfectly it made her want to weep. "Yes," she whispered. "I accept." Do-hyun smiled, and for the first time in years, Yira smiled back. Outside the small room, the galaxy continued to spin, uncaring and cruel. The Korath were still planning their invasion. Other empires still whispered about curses and doom. But in that moment, none of it mattered. In that moment, two lonely people had found each other across the impossible distances between stars, and that was the beginning of everything. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. A human had agreed to marry the cursed princess. The primitive species from the small blue planet had done what no great empire would do. They had taken the hand of a Vellani. Reactions were immediate and loud. The Korath Dominion sent a message to Earth within hours. It was polite on the surface but threatening underneath. They reminded humanity that the Vellani were already claimed, that interference in Korath affairs would have consequences. The message ended with a phrase that everyone understood as a warning. "We hope Earth values its future." Other empires sent different kinds of messages. Some were mocking. The Chitin posted on galactic communication networks about how humans were so desperate for attention that they would marry monsters. Jokes spread about cursed babies and doomed planets. Some reactions were simply confused. Smaller species who had no interest in galactic politics wondered why anyone would care. A marriage was a marriage. What was the problem? And on Earth itself, people were divided. Some celebrated. They saw this as humanity's chance to finally matter, to gain technology and allies, and a real place in the galaxy. News programs showed images of Yira and called her beautiful. Opinion pieces talked about courage and compassion. Others were afraid. They had heard the stories about Vellani curses. They did not want alien problems becoming Earth's problems. Protest groups formed overnight, demanding that the government cancel the marriage. Signs appeared in cities, Earth first, and no alien brides, and worse things that made Do-hyun's stomach turn when he saw them. He tried to ignore the noise. There was too much to do. The weeks between the announcement and the wedding were filled with work. Do-hyun and Yira spent hours each day learning about each other's cultures. There were traditions to understand, customs to respect, and a million small details that could cause offense if handled wrong. Do-hyun learned that Vellani did not eat meat. Their bodies could not process it. He learned that they slept only 4 hours each night but needed to meditate for another 4. He learned that they considered direct eye contact a sign of deep trust, given only to family and close friends. He learned that Yira loved music, especially the complex harmonies her people created with their voices alone. He learned that she had a collection of pressed flowers from every planet she had visited. He learned that she laughed more easily than he expected, Once she felt safe enough to stop hiding behind her princess mask, Yira learned about humans too. She was fascinated by their history, which Do-hyun explained with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. "You nearly destroyed yourselves?" she asked one evening, after he told her about the wars and weapons of the past. "Multiple times?" "At least 3 times that we know of," Do-hyun admitted. "There were periods where it looked like humanity was finished. But somehow, we always survived. We rebuilt. How? Why?" Do-hyun thought about it. "Stubbornness, mostly. Humans don't like giving up. Even when things seem hopeless, there's always someone who refuses to accept it. Someone who keeps fighting." Yira was quiet for a moment. "The other species call you primitive. They say you are too young, too violent, too chaotic. They're not wrong," Do-hyun said with a small smile. "We are all those things, but we're also loyal. When humans care about something, we don't let go. We hold on until our fingers break." The day before the wedding, Yira asked Do-hyun to walk with her in the station's garden section. It was a small area filled with plants from dozens of worlds, maintained by automated systems. They walked along paths lit by artificial sunlight, surrounded by flowers in colors that Do-hyun had no names for. "I need to tell you something," Yira said. Her voice was careful. "About my people. About what we can do." She explained the empathic touch. When a Villani made skin contact with another being, they could sense that being's emotions. Not thoughts, not memories, just feelings. Joy, sadness, anger, fear, love. All of it laid bare in an instant. "This is why other species fear us," Yira said. "They think we steal souls or read minds. We cannot do either. But we can feel truth. We can feel lies. It is impossible to deceive a Villani through touch." Do-hyun nodded slowly. "Is that why you touched my face? When I proposed?" "Yes." Yira stopped walking and turned to face him. Her purple eyes were vulnerable in a way he had never seen before. "I had to know. I had to know if you were sincere, or if it was all just politics." "And what did you feel?" Yira reached out and took his hand. The contact was warm, and Do-hyun felt a strange, tingling sensation. Like electricity, but gentler. "I felt kindness," she said softly. "Real kindness, not pretending. I felt determination and courage, and a little bit of fear, which is only sensible. And underneath all of it," she paused. "Loneliness," she whispered. "I felt a loneliness so deep it took my breath away. It matched my own." Do-hyun did not know what to say. He had never talked about his loneliness, not to anyone. Growing up as an orphan, working his way through the academy, always being the quiet one who watched from the edges. He had built walls around that part of himself so carefully that he barely acknowledged it existed. But Yira had felt it all in a single touch. "I'm not afraid of you," he said finally. "I'm not afraid of what you can do. If anything, it makes me want to be more honest. What's the point of lying to someone who can feel the truth? And lime. Endem. I'm." Yira's silver blood glowed brighter beneath her skin. He had learned that this happened when she felt strong emotions. "The wedding is tomorrow," she said. "After that, there is no going back. Are you certain, Do-hyun? Truly? Certain?" He squeezed her hand. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The wedding took place on the neutral moon of Kessa 4, in a hall that floated above clouds of pink and gold. Few alien dignitaries came. The Korath sent no one. Most empires sent only minor officials, just enough to say they had been represented. But the human delegation came in full force. Every ship that Earth could spare made the journey. Soldiers and scientists, politicians, and ordinary citizens. They filled the hall with their presence, a statement that needed no words. Earth stood with this union. Earth would not be ashamed. The president of Earth herself performed the ceremony. She was an older woman with gray hair and kind eyes, and her voice carried across the silent hall. "Marriage," she said, "is a promise. A promise to stand together when standing alone would be easier. A promise to face the darkness together, whatever darkness may come." She looked at Do-hyun and Yira, who stood facing each other on a platform, surrounded by flowers from both their worlds. "Today, we witness more than a union of two people. We witness a union of two species, two cultures, two ways of seeing the universe. Let this marriage be a symbol of what we believe, that compassion is stronger than fear, that connection matters more than blood, that the future is built by those brave enough to reach across the void and take a stranger's hand." Do-hyun and Yira exchanged vows. His were traditional human words, spoken simply and honestly. Hers were in the Villani language, a song more than a speech, her voice rising and falling in patterns that made several humans weep without knowing why. When it was done, when the words were spoken and the ceremony complete, Yira's entire body began to glow. Her silver blood shone through her skin like moonlight, bright enough to illuminate the whole hall. The few aliens present gasped. Some stepped back in fear, but the humans did not move. They did not understand what was happening, but they were not afraid. "What is it?" Do-hyun asked quietly. "What's happening to you?" Yira was crying, silver tears running down her glowing face, but she was smiling. "I'm bonded," she whispered. "The glow happens when a Villani forms a true emotional bond. It hasn't happened to anyone in my family for 500 years. We thought the ability was lost." She took both his hands in hers. "It means my soul has chosen you, Do-hyun." Do-hyun pulled her close and held her as she glowed and wept and laughed all at once. Around them, humans began to clap and cheer. They did not know all the details, but they knew joy when they saw it. The cursed princess had found her light, and humanity had gained something far more valuable than technology or resources. They had gained family. 3 months passed after the wedding. They were the happiest months of Yira's life. She and Do-hyun lived on the Villani homeworld of Valara Prime, in a wing of the Imperial Palace that had been prepared for them. The rooms were filled with light, designed to feel open and peaceful. Do-hyun had added some human touches. Books from Earth, photographs of places he wanted to show her someday, a small music player that filled their quarters with strange but beautiful sounds. They spent their days learning to be partners. Do-hyun studied Villani politics and customs, attending council meetings and learning the complex web of relationships that held the empire together. Yira taught him her language, laughing gently at his pronunciation mistakes, praising him when he got things right. In the evenings, they walked through the palace gardens, talking about everything and nothing. Do-hyun told her about Earth, the oceans that covered most of the planet, the mountains that touched the clouds, the cities that never slept. Yira told him about Villani art and philosophy, about the ancient poets who had written songs that took years to perform, about the dream of peace that had guided her people for 10,000 years. For a little while, it was almost possible to forget that danger was coming. Then the message arrived. It came on a cold morning, delivered by a Villani courier who was trembling so badly he could barely speak. The Korath Dominion had sent it on all frequencies, making sure everyone in the galaxy would hear. Do-hyun and Yira watched the message together in the war room, surrounded by Villani advisors and a small group of human military officers who had been assigned to the planet. The Korath commander appeared on the screen. He was massive, even by Korath standards, covered in scales so dark they looked almost black. His eyes were yellow and cold, like a predator watching prey. "People of the Villani Empire," the commander said, "your time has ended. The Dominion has waited long enough. Your alliance with the primitive humans changes nothing. Their few ships, their tiny population, their insignificant planet, none of it matters." He smiled, showing rows of teeth designed for tearing flesh. "You have 30 days to surrender. Dissolve your alliance with Earth. Accept Korath protection. Become what you were always meant to be, servants of the strong." The smile disappeared. replaced by cold anger. Refuse, and we will take what we want anyway. Your technology, your resources, your people. Everything you have built in 10,000 years will become ours, and your precious human husband will watch his little planet burn before we allow him to die. The message ended. Silence filled the war room. Yira felt numb. She had known this was coming. She had always known. But hearing it spoken aloud, seeing the hatred in the Korath commander's eyes, made it feel terrifyingly real. They're not bluffing, one of the Villani advisors said. His voice was tired, defeated. The Korath fleet is already gathering at the border. 200 warships. Maybe more. How many ships do we have? Do-hyun asked. The advisor looked at him with sad eyes. None, Consort Do-hyun. The Villani have no warships. We have never needed them. What about defensive systems? Shields? Weapons platforms? We have planetary shields, very strong ones. But they will not last forever against a fleet that size. And we have nothing that can fight back. Do-hyun turned to the human officers. What about Earth? Commander Baek-suho stepped forward. He was Do-hyun's oldest friend, a man he had known since their days at the academy. Suho was tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that rarely showed emotion, but Do-hyun could see the concern in his eyes. Earth has 42 combat-capable ships, Suho said. Most of them are small. The largest is the carrier Sejong, which can hold 50 fighters, against 200 Korath warships. He shook his head. It would be suicide. Then we need allies, Do-hyun said. What about the Galactic Council? Can they intervene? We already asked, Yira said quietly. They refused. Villani affairs are not their concern, they said. And humanity is too small to protect. She laughed bitterly. They used almost those exact words. Do-hyun felt anger rising in his chest. He had spent his whole life believing that cooperation was possible, that beings could overcome their differences if they just tried hard enough. But the galaxy seemed determined to prove him wrong. So we're alone, he said. Yes, Yira whispered. We're alone. Do-hyun stood very still for a long moment. Everyone in the room watched him, waiting. Some expected him to despair. Some expected him to run. He was only human, after all. What could he possibly do against an empire that had been conquering worlds for centuries? Then Do-hyun did something no one expected. He smiled. Good, he said. Then we don't have to worry about anyone else getting in the way. He turned to Commander Suho. Contact Earth. Tell them to send everything. Every ship, every soldier, every piece of equipment we have. This isn't a request. This is us calling in every favor we're owed. Suho nodded and moved to the communication panel. Do-hyun looked at the Villani advisors. Your people have never fought a war. That's about to change. I need complete access to all your technology, especially your shields and medical systems. I need engineers who are willing to learn new ways of thinking. And I need soldiers. An older advisor shook his head. Consort Do-hyun, our people are not warriors. We don't know how to fight. Then we'll teach you. Do-hyun said simply. Humans have been fighting for as long as we've existed. We've made every mistake. We've learned every lesson the hard way. We know how to turn farmers into soldiers and scientists into tacticians. It won't be easy. It won't be pleasant. But it can be done. He walked to where Yira sat, her face pale with worry. He took her hands in his. I made you a promise, he said. I promise to stand beside you no matter what. I don't make promises I can't keep. Yira looked up at him with her purple eyes full of fear and hope mixed together. Do-hyun, even if we fight, even if we do everything right, we might still lose. The Korath are so much stronger than us. Maybe, Do-hyun admitted. But there's something the Korath don't understand about humans. We've faced extinction before. We've stared into the void and refused to blink. When someone threatens the people we love, We don't calculate odds or weigh options. We fight. He touched her face gently. You asked me once why humans would die for another species. Let me tell you a story. A long time ago on Earth, there was a battle where 300 soldiers faced an army of hundreds of thousands. They knew they would lose. They fought anyway, and their sacrifice gave their people the time they needed to survive. What happened to the 300? They died. Every single one. But they became legends. Their names are remembered thousands of years later. Their courage inspired generations. Do-hyun's voice was soft but firm. I'm not saying we're going to die. I'm saying that win or lose, history will remember what happened here. They'll remember that humans and Vellani stood together against impossible odds. They'll remember that we didn't surrender. We didn't run. He stepped back and addressed the entire room. We have 30 days. Let's make them count. Yira stood and walked to stand beside him. Her silver blood began to glow faintly beneath her skin. You heard my husband, she said, and her voice was stronger than it had been in months. We have work to do. No. The war room erupted into activity. Officers and advisors began shouting orders, pulling up tactical displays, sending messages across the stars, and in the middle of it all, a human and a Vellani stood side by side, their hands clasped together, facing a future that was terrifying and uncertain, but they were facing it together, and that made all the difference. The Korath fleet arrived exactly on the 30th day. 217 warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Velara system. They moved in perfect formation, a wall of metal and weapons that blocked out the stars. At their center was the Korath flagship, a massive vessel called the Conqueror, home to Commander Vrax and 60,000 soldiers. Commander Vrax stood on his bridge and looked at the tactical display with satisfaction. The Vellani homeworld hung in space before him, like a ripe fruit, waiting to be picked. After centuries of planning and patience, the moment had finally come. Report, he ordered. Planetary shields are active, his tactical officer said. Vellani power signatures throughout the system. And... The officer paused, confused. Human vessels. Approximately 40 ships in defensive formation around the planet. Vrax laughed. 40 ships? Against our fleet? The humans are even more foolish than we thought. He activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, advance. Destroy the human vessels. Disable the planetary shields. Prepare ground forces for landing. He smiled, his predator smile. Today, the Vellani become ours. The Korath fleet began to move. On the bridge of the carrier Sejong, Commander Baek Suho watched them come. His face was calm, but his heart was racing. Beside him stood officers from 3 different species. Humans, Vellani, and a handful of volunteers from smaller worlds who had quietly joined the defense force. They're in range in 15 minutes, his tactical officer reported. Suho nodded. He activated the communication system that linked all allied ships. All vessels, this is Commander Suho. You know the plan. Stay in formation. Trust your training. Remember what we're fighting for. He paused, looking at the mass of enemy ships on his display. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten people we love. Make me proud. End. The battle began with missiles. Human ships fired first, launching hundreds of warheads that streaked across space toward the Korath fleet. The enemy responded with their own weapons, and the void between the two forces became a storm of explosions and light. The first Korath ships reached the defensive line. They were met with something they did not expect. Human ships that refused to stay still. Instead of forming static defensive positions, the human vessels moved constantly, weaving through space in patterns that made them difficult to target. And every human ship was wrapped in Vellani shields. The shields were the result of 30 days of desperate work. Vellani engineers had modified their defensive technology to fit human vessels, creating a protection system that the Korath had never encountered. Energy weapons that should have torn through human ships were absorbed harmlessly. Missiles that should have destroyed them exploded against shimmering barriers. The Korath were surprised. They were not worried. "Increase power to forward weapons," Commander Vrax ordered. "They cannot shield forever. Wear them down." He was right. The shields were strong, but they were not infinite. Human ships began to take damage. A frigate named Busan lost its shields and was torn apart by concentrated fire. A destroyer called Incheon suffered critical damage and had to withdraw. But for every human ship that fell back, another pressed forward. The battle spread across the entire system. Korath warships that tried to bypass the main fleet and approach the planet directly found themselves hunted by packs of human fighters. Small, fast, and piloted by crews who flew like they had nothing to lose. The fighters harassed the larger vessels without mercy. Commander Vrax began to feel the first touch of doubt. "Why won't they break?" he demanded. "They're outmatched. They should be fleeing." His tactical officer had no answer. On the planet below, the ground assault had begun. Korath landing ships had punched through the defensive perimeter and touched down on the surface of Valara Prime. Thousands of soldiers poured out, expecting to face frightened civilians who had never known war. Instead, they found Kang Do-hyun. Do-hyun had spent the last 30 days training Vallani volunteers. They were not soldiers. Most of them had never held a weapon in their lives, but they had learned the basics. How to shoot, how to take cover, how to move as a unit. More importantly, they had learned why they were fighting. Do-hyun stood at the front of the defensive line, wearing armor that combined human durability with Vallani technology. Beside him were Vallani fighters, their pale skin glowing with determination. Behind them were the cities they had sworn to protect. "Remember," Do-hyun called out as the Korath advanced, "they expect you to be afraid. They expect you to run. Show them how wrong they are." The first wave of Korath soldiers crashed against the defensive line like water against rock. Weapons fire filled the air. The ground shook with explosions. Do-hyun fought with everything he had. He was not the strongest fighter or the most skilled, but he was everywhere at once, encouraging his troops, plugging gaps in the line, refusing to give ground. The Korath pushed forward. Inch by inch, they gained ground. Then Yura arrived. She had refused to stay in the safety of the palace. Despite every argument, every plea, every order, she had insisted on joining the battle. Now she moved through the chaos like a silver ghost, using her empathic abilities in a way no Vallani had ever attempted before. She could feel the enemy. She could sense their intentions, their emotions, their plans. When a Korath unit prepared to flank, she knew before they moved. When an enemy commander gave an order, she felt the soldiers' response. "Left side," she called out to Do-hyun. 20 soldiers, moving through the collapsed building. "Heavy weapons team on the ridge," she warned moments later. "They're targeting our medical station." Her gift turned the tide. The Vallani defenders began to anticipate enemy movements, to prepare for attacks before they came. The Korath advance slowed, then stopped. Commander Vrax watched from orbit, his confusion turning to anger. "Send more troops," he ordered. "Overwhelm them." But there were no more troops to send. The ground forces were fully committed, and the space battle was consuming resources faster than expected. The human ships were dying. One by one, their shields failed, and they fell to Korath weapons. But they kept fighting. They kept blocking the enemy from reaching the planet. And then something happened that no one could explain. A human frigate named Soul's Pride found itself directly in the path of a Korath dreadnought that had broken through the defensive line. The massive enemy ship was heading straight for Valara Prime, ready to begin orbital bombardment. The Soul's Pride was damaged. Its weapons were offline. Its shields were failing. Captain Ojina stood on her bridge and made a choice. "All hands," she announced, her voice steady. "Abandon ship. Get to the escape pods." That's an order. Her crew obeyed. Pods launched from the dying frigate, carrying its people to safety. But Captain Gina did not leave. She stayed at the helm, and she aimed her ship at the dreadnought's engines. The impact was visible from the planet's surface. The Soul's Pride struck the Korath dreadnought at full speed, tearing through its hull and igniting its power core. The explosion destroyed both ships instantly, creating a temporary star that burned for 30 seconds before fading into nothing. Captain Gina died, but the dreadnought died with her. On the Korath flagship, Commander Vrax stared at his tactical display in disbelief. She rammed us," he whispered. "She sacrificed herself. She sacrificed herself." His tactical officer's voice was shaking. "Commander, the humans, they're not retreating. They're fighting harder." It was true. The death of the Soul's Pride had not broken human morale. It had strengthened it. Ships that had been falling back now pressed forward with renewed fury. Soldiers on the ground fought with a ferocity that the Korath had never encountered. On the surface of Valara Prime, Do-Hyun felt something change. He saw a Korath soldier hesitate, just for a moment, before engaging. He saw another glance back toward the landing ships, as if calculating escape routes. The enemy was afraid. "Push forward!" Do-Hyun shouted. "They're breaking." The Vallani fighters surged ahead, no longer the terrified civilians they had been 30 days ago. They were soldiers now. They were defenders of their home. And they were winning. As the sun set over Valara Prime, the Korath ground forces began to retreat. Landing ships lifted off, abandoning soldiers who could not reach them in time. In orbit, the Korath fleet had stopped advancing. They hung in space, wounded and uncertain, waiting for orders that their commander could not bring himself to give. The battle was not over. But for the first time, the outcome was no longer certain. And across the galaxy, beings of every species watched the reports coming from Valara Prime and saw something they had never seen before. Humans dying for aliens they barely knew. Humans standing against impossible odds. Humans refusing to give up, even when all hope seemed lost. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The night after the first day of battle was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Do-Hyun sat on a broken wall at the edge of a destroyed city district, watching smoke rise into the dark sky. His armor was scorched and dented. There was dried blood on his hands that he was not sure belonged to him or someone else. Every muscle in his body ached. Beside him, Yira sat with her eyes closed. Her glow had faded to almost nothing. Using her empathic abilities so intensely had drained her in ways she had never experienced before. "How bad is it?" she asked, without opening her eyes. Do-Hyun did not answer immediately. He looked out at the ruined streets, the collapsed buildings, the fires that still burned in the distance. He thought about the reports he had received. The number of dead, the number of wounded, the supplies that were running low. "Bad," he finally said. "But we're still here. That's more than anyone expected. The Korath haven't retreated. They're regrouping." "I know." Yira opened her eyes and looked at him. In the dim light, her purple irises seemed almost black. "Do-Hyun, I felt them today. The Korath soldiers. Do you know what they're feeling? Anger? Hatred? Confusion." She shook her head slowly. "They don't understand. Every battle they've ever fought, their enemies eventually run. They break. They surrender. But humans don't do that. The Korath keep pushing, and humans keep pushing back. It frightens them." Do-Hyun laughed tiredly. "Good. They should be frightened." His communication device buzzed. He pulled it from his belt and saw Commander Suho's face appear on the small screen. "Do-Hyun, you need to see this." "What is it?" "The Korath commander. He's broadcasting on all frequencies. Open channel." Do-Hyun activated the channel, and Commander Vrax's face appeared. The Korath leader looked different than he had in the original ultimatum. His confidence was cracked. There was something in his yellow eyes that might have been doubt. "Human forces," Vrax said. "This is Commander Vrax of the Korath Dominion. I am offering terms." Do-Hyun sat up straighter. Withdraw your forces from the Villani system. Return to your own territory. In exchange, the Korath will not pursue. Earth will be spared. He leaned closer to the camera. Your brave gesture has been noted. You have proven that humans are not as weak as we believed, but you cannot win this war. Surrender the Villani, and your people will live. Continue to fight, and Earth will burn. The message ended. Do-hyun stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Then he stood up. His exhaustion forgotten. Suho, can you patch me through to the Korath fleet? Same open channel they used? Yes, but Do-hyun, what are you going to say? Something they need to hear. It took only minutes to establish the connection. When the light indicated he was broadcasting, Do-hyun took a deep breath and spoke. Commander Vrax, all ships of the Korath fleet. My name is Kang Do-hyun. I'm a human. I'm not a general or an admiral. I'm just a man who made a promise. He paused, gathering his thoughts. You asked why humans would die for a species not our own. Let me tell you something about my people. Behind him, Yira watched with tears forming in her eyes. We have a word in my language, Jiang. It doesn't translate well. It means a bond deeper than logic, stronger than self-interest. A connection forged through shared struggle. Once you share Jiang with someone, they become part of you. Their pain is your pain. Their joy is your joy. Do-hyun's voice grew stronger. The Villani are not strangers to us anymore. We've bled together. We've cried together. We've buried our dead side by side. They are family. And humans do not abandon family. He looked directly into the camera. You think we're primitive because we're young to the stars. But we've been fighting for survival since we crawled out of caves. We faced extinction from ice ages, from plagues, from our own weapons. We've torn ourselves apart and put ourselves back together. We're still here. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? It's not our ships. It's not our weapons. It's that we never, ever give up on the people we love. You can kill us. You can destroy our ships and burn our cities. But you will never make us abandon the people who trusted us enough to ask for help. Do-hyun stepped closer to the camera. So here's my answer to your terms. No. We're not leaving. We're not surrendering. We're going to stand here on this planet beside our Villani family, and we're going to fight until there's nothing left of us to fight with. And if you destroy us, if you kill every last one of us, you will have to live with the knowledge of what you did. Every species in the galaxy is watching. They'll see what happens to people who threaten those under human protection. He smiled grimly. Maybe we'll lose. But you'll never be able to call it a victory. Not really. Because everyone will know that it took the full might of the Korath Dominion to defeat a handful of humans and their friends. They'll tell stories about this battle for 1,000 years. And in every story, you'll be the villains. He reached for the control to end the transmission, then stopped. One more thing. To anyone else watching this broadcast, anyone who's ever been afraid of the Korath, anyone who's ever felt alone in this galaxy, you don't have to be afraid anymore. Stand with us, stand with the Villani, stand with anyone the Korath try to crush. His voice softened. We're stronger together than we ever could be alone. That's not just a human belief. That's the truth. He ended the transmission. For a long moment, nothing happened. The night remained quiet. The smoke continued to rise. Then Suho's voice came through the communication device, tight with emotion. Do-hyun, you need to look at your sensors. Do-hyun pulled up the tactical display. At first, he did not understand what he was seeing. There were new signatures at the edge of the system. Ships that had not been there before. Who are they? Kitine carrier. It just dropped out of hyperspace. Do-hyun's heart stopped. More enemies? But then another signature appeared. And another. 2 Valdorian cruisers, Suho reported, his voice breaking. An Elarai medical frigate. Do-hyun, there's a Rithaki destroyer. They've never allied with anyone. The signatures kept appearing. 5 ships. 10 ships. 20 ships. They're hailing us, Suho said. All of them. They're saying. He laughed. A sound caught between joy and disbelief. They're saying they heard your message. They're saying they want to stand with us. Yira was crying now, silver tears running down her pale face. On the Korath flagship, Commander Vrax stared at his tactical display with something approaching terror. The ships that had arrived were not enough to match his fleet, but they were enough to change the equation. They were enough to make victory costly. They were enough to make the Dominion look weak, and more signatures were appearing every minute. Commander, his tactical officer said, we're receiving reports from home. The Senate is concerned. They're questioning whether this campaign is worth the cost. Vrax did not respond. He was watching more ships arrive at the edge of the system. Species that had never worked together were forming a fleet. Species that had avoided conflict for generations were readying weapons. All because one human had given a speech. Commander, your orders. Vrax closed his eyes. He thought about the cost of continuing. He thought about the cost of retreating. He thought about his legacy, his honor, his future. He opened his eyes and made his decision. All ships, withdraw. Fall back to the hyperspace limit. Prepare for retreat. The tactical officer stared at him. Sir, you heard me. We're leaving. But the Villani, the humans, will still be here tomorrow. And the next day. And the day after that. Vrax's voice was bitter. We came to conquer a dying empire. Instead, we found something else. Something I don't understand. He turned away from the display. This isn't over. But today, we retreat. Dorda. Krepton. The Korath fleet began to move. Turning away from Valara Prime. Heading back toward the darkness between stars. On the planet below, soldiers looked up as the enemy ships withdrew. Some cheered. Some cried. Some simply sat down and stared at the sky, unable to believe what they were seeing. Dohyun found Yira in the ruins and pulled her into his arms. She was shaking. They're leaving, she whispered. They're actually leaving. Yes, Dohyun said, holding her tight. We did it. All of us. Together. Above them, ships from a dozen different species took up positions alongside the battered human fleet. A defensive formation, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity had come to the stars as outsiders, primitives, barely worth noticing. They were leaving this battle as something else entirely. They were leaving as leaders. 1 year later, the galaxy was different. The Korath Dominion had not collapsed, but it had changed. Commander Vrax faced questioning from the Senate when he returned home, accused of cowardice and failure. But it was not Vrax who fell. It was the Senate itself. Word of what had happened at Valara Prime spread through Korath society, and with it came uncomfortable questions. Why had they attacked a peaceful people? Why had they threatened a species that had done nothing to them? Why had they lost? The younger generation of Korath began demanding change. They did not want to be villains in galactic history. They did not want to be remembered as the ones who tried to crush the cursed princess and the humans who stood beside her. Within 6 months, the old Senate was replaced. The new leaders sent a message to the Villani. Not an apology, exactly, but an acknowledgement. They would not attack again. They were willing to talk. It was a small step. But it was a beginning. The Galactic Council, which had refused to help when help was needed, now rushed to embrace the new alliance. The Human-Villani Alliance was formally recognized as a major galactic power. Representatives from both species were given permanent seats on the council. Their votes suddenly mattered. Other changes followed. The species that had sent ships to help at Valara Prime formed new bonds with each other. The Chitin and the Valdorians, ancient enemies, found themselves working together. The Ellerai shared their medical knowledge more freely than ever before. The Rithaki, who had hidden from the galaxy for centuries, began to venture out again. And everywhere, beings looked at humans differently. They were no longer primitives. They were no longer insignificant. They were the ones who had stood against impossible odds. They were the ones who had given everything for strangers. They were the ones whose words had moved an entire galaxy. On Valara Prime, the rebuilding continued. Cities that had been damaged in the battle were being restored, with human and Vellani workers side by side. The scars on the land would take years to heal, but already there were signs of new growth. Gardens were planted in the rubble. Children played in streets that had once been battlefields. Emperor Voran died peacefully in his sleep 3 months after the battle. His final words were spoken to his daughter, who sat beside him, holding his hand. "You did it," he whispered. "You saved our people. Not through surrender. Through love. I am so proud of you." Yira wept as her father passed, but her tears were not only of grief, they were also of gratitude. He had lived long enough to see his people safe. He had died knowing that the daughter he had sent away to beg for help had returned as a hero. The coronation of Empress Yira took place on a clear morning in the Great Hall of the Imperial Palace. It was attended by representatives from more species than had ever gathered in one place before. Humans stood alongside Chitin, Valdorians beside Elorai, Rethaki near beings whose names they were still learning. Yira walked down the long aisle wearing robes of silver and white, her skin glowing softly with the bond she shared with her husband. Do-Hyun walked beside her, wearing formal human dress, a dark suit that made his warm skin seem even richer. At the front of the hall, an ancient Vellani priest waited to perform the ceremony. The crown of the Vellani Empire sat on a pillow before him, a circlet of woven silver that had been worn by emperors and empresses for 10,000 years. The priest spoke the traditional words. He asked Yira if she accepted the burden of leadership. He asked if she would protect her people, guide them with wisdom, and serve them with love. Yira answered yes to each question. Then the priest turned to Do-Hyun. "Kang Do-Hyun of Earth," he said, "you have married our princess. You have fought for our people. You have bled for us and risked death for us. Now you stand beside our empress as her consort." He lifted a second crown, smaller than the first but equally beautiful. "Do you accept this honor? Do you swear to stand beside the empress in all things? To support her in times of joy and times of sorrow? To be her partner in the great work of leadership?" Do-Hyun looked at Yira. She was looking back at him, with her purple eyes shining. "I do," he said. The priest placed the crown on his head. The gathered audience erupted in applause and cheers. But it was Yira who spoke next. "Wait," she said, her voice carrying across the hall. The applause died down. Everyone watched as Yira turned to face Do-Hyun. "1 year ago," she said, "I stood alone in a great hall, rejected by every empire in the galaxy. I had lost all hope. I thought my people were doomed, and that I had failed them." Her voice trembled, but held. Then a man I had never met walked forward and offered to hear my proposal. When everyone else turned away, he stood up. When I had nothing to offer but a curse and a dying empire, he saw something worth fighting for. She reached out and took Do-Hyun's hands. "You knelt for me when no one else would. You treated me as worthy of respect when the entire galaxy called me cursed. You stood beside me through darkness and battle and death." She smiled, tears running down her glowing face. "Now rise, Kang Do-Hyun. You have earned the right to stand. You never need to kneel before me again." On Tenvra. Sing. Do-Hyun stood tall, his hands still clasped with hers. The hall was silent. Beings of every species watched with wide eyes as the Vellani Empress and her human consort stood together. Equal partners, their bond visible in the way their fingers intertwined. Then someone began to clap. Then another. Then another. The applause built until the walls shook with it. Beings who had never applauded for a human were standing on their feet, celebrating this moment. That evening, as the celebrations continued in the palace below, Do-Hyun and Yira stood together on a high balcony. The sky was dark, filled with stars that seemed brighter than before. Below them, The city glittered with lights, and the sound of music and laughter drifted up. "Look," Yira said, pointing at the horizon. A new star was rising. Earth's sun, made visible from Valara Prime, through a gift of combined human and Vellani engineering. A permanent bridge between their worlds. A light that would shine every night. Yira took Do-hyun's hand. Her empathic abilities activated, and she shared what she was feeling with him. Joy, gratitude, hope, and underneath it all, a love so deep and true that it took his breath away. "You asked me once what I wanted," she whispered. "Not my empire, not my duty, me." She looked at him with her purple eyes full of peace. "This. I wanted this. Someone who sees me. Someone who chose me. Someone who stands beside me, not because they have to, but because they want to." Do-hyun pulled her close. "Humanity's greatest export isn't technology or soldiers," he said softly. "It's stubbornness. We're too stubborn to let good things die." Yira laughed, a sound of pure happiness. Below them, in the palace gardens, children were playing. Vellani children, with pale, glowing skin. Human children, with their diverse features. And already, the first children born of human-Vellani partnerships, unique beings who carried the blood of both species, who would grow up in a galaxy changed forever. The cursed princess was cursed no more. The insignificant humans were insignificant no longer. And across the galaxy, beings of every species told the story of what had happened on Valara Prime. They told of the nobles who rejected the alien princess, and the human man who knelt before her without reluctance. They told of battle and sacrifice, of courage and love, of a galaxy transformed by a simple act of kindness. It became a legend, and like all the best legends, it was true. On the balcony, Do-hyun and Yira watched Earth's sun rise over their new home, their hands clasped together, their hearts beating as one. The beginning of the story had been loneliness and despair. The end of the story was this. Two people, standing together, under foreign stars, surrounded by family they had chosen, facing a future, bright with possibility. Not bad, Do-hyun thought. For a primitive species from a small blue planet, not bad at all.